Opening arguments. Rachel Chen adjusted her navy blazer as she stared at the gleaming glass entrance of the San Francisco County Courthouse. Today marked her first major case as lead counsel for the Environmental Justice Project, representing the residents of Mercer Springs against Westlake Chemical Corporation. For 3 years, she'd prepared for this moment, interviewing families whose children developed mysterious illnesses, collecting water samples, and filing motion after motion while corporate lawyers buried her in paperwork. Ready to be eaten alive? The deep voice came from behind her. Rachel turned to face Julian Pierce, Westlake's star attorney. His tailored charcoal suit probably cost more than her monthly rent. His reputation preceded him, Yale Law Review, undefeated trial record, and rumored to be next in line for managing partner at Blackwell and Hayes. "I prefer my conversations without threats." "Mr. Pierce?" Rachel replied, gripping her weathered leather briefcase tighter. Julian's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Just managing expectations. These cases always end the same way, a modest settlement after months of wasted time." "Save yourself the trouble." "See you inside," she said, walking past him toward the entrance. The marble floors echoed under her sensible heels as she made her way to courtroom 3. Inside, Rachel arranged her materials methodically, a habit from her days as a public defender. Her second chair, Dev Patel, slid into place beside her, his expression betraying his nervousness. "Relax," Rachel whispered. "They're expecting us to be intimidated. Don't give them the satisfaction." The gallery filled with residents of Mercer Springs, the Garcias, whose daughter suffered unexplained seizures, the Johnsons, whose well water ran rust-colored for months, elderly Mrs. Whitaker, who'd lost her husband to a rare kidney disease. These weren't just clients. They were people who trusted Rachel with their last hope for justice. Judge Eleanor Woodson entered, her stern expression sweeping across the courtroom. "Westlake Chemical Corporation versus the residents of Mercer Springs. Let's begin." Julian Pierce approached the jury box with confident strides. "Ladies and gentlemen, this case is about science, not emotion. The plaintiffs would have you believe that Westlake Chemical is responsible for every medical issue in Mercer Springs. But correlation is not causation. Our facility has met every environmental standard set by state and federal regulations. The plaintiffs' testing methods are flawed, their science questionable, and their claims exaggerated. By the end of this trial, the evidence will show that Westlake has always been a responsible corporate citizen and good neighbor." When Rachel's turn came, she left her notes at the table and approached the jury directly. "This case is indeed about science," she began softly. "The science of how trichloroethylene and hexavalent chromium, chemicals discharged by Westlake, travel through groundwater. The science of how these substances, even in small amounts, damage human organs over time." "But you're right, Mr. Pierce," she said, turning briefly toward the defense table. "This case is not about emotion. It's about facts." Rachel pointed to a simple map of Mercer Springs. "Fact. Before Westlake built their facility in 2018, Mercer Springs had cancer rates below the national average. Fact. In the 5 years since, cancer diagnoses have increased by 340%. Fact. Independent laboratory testing found chemicals specific to Westlake's manufacturing process in every affected resident's water supply." As Rachel continued, she noticed Julian Pierce watching her, not with the dismissive smirk from earlier, but with unexpected intensity. She recognized that look from seasoned opponents who had just realized they might be in trouble. When Judge Woodson called for a recess, Julian approached Rachel in the hallway. "Impressive opening," he said, surprising her with what sounded like genuine respect. "But openings are theater. Evidence is reality." "Then you should be concerned," Rachel replied, "because unlike theater, I don't need to embellish reality to make my point." Something flickered across Julian's face, annoyance, perhaps, or curiosity. For a split second, Rachel glimpsed something beneath his polished exterior, a person, not just an adversary. "May the best lawyer win," he said with an enigmatic smile before walking away. Rachel watched him go, already planning her first witness examination. She hadn't spent years building this case to lose to a corporate golden boy, no matter how formidable he might be. Discovery. The Mercer Springs case entered its second week with Rachel Chen calling Dr. Elaine Winters to the stand. A hydrogeologist with 20 years of experience mapping groundwater contamination, Dr. Winters had agreed to testify despite pressure from industry contacts. Dr. Winters, can you explain to the jury what your analysis of Mercer Springs' water supply revealed? Rachel asked, standing beside a digital display ready to show the relevant maps. My team found concentrated plumes of industrial solvents extending from Westlake's facility directly into the aquifer serving residential wells, Dr. Winters replied, her voice steady as she pointed to the colored gradients on the map. These chemicals match the signature compounds used in Westlake's manufacturing process. From the corner of her eye, Rachel noticed Julian Pierce scribbling furious notes. When he rose for cross-examination, his approach surprised her. Dr. Winters, isn't it possible these contaminants came from the abandoned textile mill 3 miles upstream? He asked smoothly. No, Mr. Pierce. The textile mill closed in 2001. These compounds are fresh, degrading at rates consistent with recent contamination. Furthermore, the molecular structure of these chemicals contains proprietary markers unique to Westlake's formulations. Julian paused, clearly caught off guard. No further questions, Your Honor. Later that evening, Rachel worked alone in her modest office, surrounded by stacks of technical reports and deposition transcripts. A knock at the door startled her. Julian Pierce stood in the doorway, raindrops glistening on his wool overcoat. Working late? He asked, stepping inside uninvited. Rachel straightened. What do you want, Mr. Pierce? Julian, please. He unbuttoned his coat. I thought we might discuss settlement options. After 2 years of stonewalling, now you want to settle? Rachel crossed her arms. What changed? Dr. Winters made some compelling points, Julian admitted. His usual arrogance softened. And tomorrow's witnesses won't help our case. Rachel studied his face. You've seen something in the discovery materials your team missed? A hint of respect flickered in Julian's eyes. Let's just say I've become concerned about certain inconsistencies in Westlake's internal documentation. I need full remediation costs, medical monitoring for all residents, and compensation for families already affected, Rachel said firmly. Julian moved closer, the scent of his expensive cologne filling the small space between them. Westlake won't go that high. They've authorized me to offer— This isn't a negotiation, Rachel interrupted, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. Those people are suffering. Children have leukemia. That's the reality beyond your billable hours. Something unexpected passed between them. A moment of genuine connection. Julian's carefully constructed facade cracked, revealing a glimpse of conscience. I'll take your terms to the board, he said quietly. But Rachel— Be careful. There are documents you haven't seen yet. After Julian left, Rachel stayed motionless, processing their encounter. His warning felt sincere, but she couldn't afford to trust the opposition, especially one who made her pulse quicken for reasons unrelated to the case. The next morning, a courier delivered a sealed envelope to Rachel's office. Inside was a flash drive with a note in Julian's handwriting, missing from discovery. Use carefully. The files contained internal emails showing Westlake executives discussing containment failures and deliberately falsifying environmental compliance reports. It was the smoking gun Rachel needed, but using it would expose Julian as the source. When they passed in the courthouse corridor later that day, their eyes met briefly. Neither spoke, but an unspoken understanding passed between them. The battle lines were shifting, becoming blurred by something neither had anticipated. That night, Rachel stood under the shower, letting hot water ease the tension in her shoulders. Julian Pierce was either experiencing an attack of conscience or setting an elaborate trap. Either way, she couldn't ignore the evidence or the unsettling attraction developing between them, both equally dangerous to the case she'd dedicated years to building. Cross-examination. The courtroom fell silent as Rachel approached the witness stand where Westlake's environmental compliance officer, Terrence Vaughn, sat with practiced composure. Mr. Vaughn, in your sworn testimony, you stated Westlake has never exceeded permissible discharge limits. Is that correct? Rachel asked. Yes, our records show consistent compliance, Vaughn replied confidently. Rachel nodded to Dev, who displayed an email on the courtroom screens. This is correspondence from you to CEO Gregory Westlake, dated March 17th, 2021. Could you read the highlighted portion? Color drained from Vaughn's face. The Northwest containment system failed again last night. Third time this quarter. We're looking at chromium levels 40 times above regulatory limits. Cleanup will take weeks, but I've instructed the team to adjust sampling dates to maintain compliance on paper. Murmurs erupted throughout the courtroom. Rachel glanced toward Julian, whose expression remained carefully neutral even as his colleagues whispered frantically. Mr. Vaughn, did you just read an admission of deliberately falsifying environmental compliance records? Rachel pressed. Objection! Julian stood abruptly. Your Honor, this document wasn't included in discovery. Judge Woodson frowned. Ms. Chen? Your Honor, we received these materials through an anonymous whistleblower, Rachel stated, avoiding Julian's gaze. Their authenticity can be verified by metadata and Mr. Vaughn's own admission that this is his email. I'll allow it, Judge Woodson ruled after consideration. The witness will answer the question. By day's end, 3 more Westlake executives had been forced to acknowledge similar damning communications. As Rachel packed her briefcase, she felt Julian's presence before she saw him. My office wants a meeting with you, he said quietly. Tomorrow, 8 a.m. Am I supposed to be intimidated? Rachel asked. Julian stepped closer. Rachel, what you did today was introduce evidence that your client illegally withheld, she finished. You know that's not what happened, he said, voice barely above a whisper. Their eyes locked, neither willing to acknowledge the truth aloud, that Julian had sacrificed his professional ethics to expose his client's wrongdoing. Why are you helping me? Rachel finally asked. Julian glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard. Maybe I'm tired of defending the indefensible. Maybe seeing those families in the gallery every day is getting to me. He paused. Or maybe it's the way you look at me like I might actually be worth redeeming. The air between them charged with tension beyond their legal battle. Rachel fought the urge to reach for him, reminded herself of the professional lines they couldn't cross. Tomorrow's meeting, Julian continued. It's a trap. They suspect someone leaked those documents. They'll offer a settlement that seems generous, but contains clauses preventing future litigation when the next wave of illnesses appears. Why tell me this? Because you deserve to win, he said simply, and because I can't stop thinking about you. The admission hung between them, dangerous and exhilarating. Rachel stepped back, needing physical distance to maintain her focus. I can't trust this, she said, though her voice lacked conviction. I know, Julian smiled sadly. But tomorrow bring your own recording device. And don't drink anything they offer you. After Julian left, Rachel sat alone in the empty courtroom, weighing her options. Using his inside information might secure justice for her clients, but the growing connection between them complicated everything. Professional boundaries blurred with personal desire, both of them standing on opposite sides of a case that could define their careers. That night, Rachel dreamed of Julian, not as her opponent, but as someone fighting alongside her. She woke with the unsettling realization that somewhere between opening arguments and today's cross-examination, something fundamental had shifted. The man she'd prepared to battle had become someone she might actually need, both for her case and for reasons she wasn't ready to examine. Rebuttal. The settlement meeting unfolded exactly as Julian had warned. Rachel sat across from Westlake's executive team, including CEO Gregory Westlake himself, a silver-haired man whose warm smile never reached his cold eyes. Julian sat beside the corporate counsel, his face an unreadable mask. Ms. Chen, we've prepared a generous offer, Westlake began. $40 million for remediation efforts, plus individual settlements for affected families. Rachel reviewed the document, noting the clause Julian had mentioned, a permanent waiver of all future claims related to groundwater contamination. This isn't acceptable, she replied calmly. The proposed remediation doesn't address the deeper aquifer contamination, and the medical trust fund is insufficient for ongoing treatment. Westlake's smile tightened. Perhaps you misunderstand your position. We have evidence suggesting the leaked documents were illegally obtained. That's a serious allegation, Rachel said, activating the recording device in her pocket as Julian had suggested. We've tracked the security breach to someone inside this firm, Westlake continued, his gaze shifting briefly to Julian. Unless you accept our offer today, we'll pursue criminal charges against whoever assisted you. Rachel maintained her composure. Are you threatening me, Mr. Westlake? Not at all. I'm simply explaining the consequences of corporate espionage. Julian spoke for the first time. Gregory, this approach seems unnecessarily adversarial. Interesting perspective, Julian, Westlake replied coldly, especially given the evidence pointing to your computer as the source of the breach. The room fell silent. Julian's colleagues shifted away from him as though contamination were contagious. I've served this firm loyally for 9 years, Julian said steadily, and apparently developed a conscience at precisely the wrong moment, Westlake snapped. Or perhaps your interest in opposing counsel clouded your judgment. Rachel felt heat rise to her cheeks as all eyes turned to her. This meeting is over, she announced, standing. Any further communications should go through formal channels. Outside, rain poured in sheets as Rachel hurried toward her car. Footsteps splashed behind her. Rachel, wait, Julian called. She turned to find him soaked, his pristine suit ruined by the downpour. They fired you? Effective immediately, he confirmed, rain streaming down his face. I have until 5 p.m. to clear out my office. I'm sorry, she said, meaning it despite everything. Don't be. I've spent years justifying my choices, telling myself I was just doing my job, that everyone deserves representation. Lightning flashed, illuminating the raw honesty in his expression. But this case, these people, I couldn't keep pretending. Rachel struggled with conflicting emotions, gratitude for his help, suspicion about his motives, and the undeniable attraction intensifying between them. What happens now? She asked. I've sent copies of everything to the EPA and Justice Department, Julian said. Tomorrow, Westlake faces federal charges alongside your civil case. Without thinking, Rachel stepped forward and kissed him. The rain soaked them both as Julian's arms encircled her, drawing her against him with an intensity that matched the storm around them. Years of opposing each other dissolved in that moment, replaced by something neither had expected to find. When they finally separated, breathless, Julian traced her cheek with his fingertips. I've wanted to do that since your opening argument. We shouldn't, Rachel whispered, even as she leaned into his touch. Probably not, he agreed, smiling. But sometimes the letter of the law matters less than its spirit. That night in Rachel's apartment, professional boundaries crumbled entirely. Julian's fingers traced constellations across her skin, his touch reverent as they explored this new territory between them. Morning found them tangled together, the weight of the coming day's battle temporarily forgotten in the sanctuary they'd created. As Rachel dressed for court, reality reasserted itself. We still have opposing interests in that courtroom, she reminded him. Julian nodded, buttoning his shirt, the same one from yesterday. After today, I won't have any clients left. But you still have people counting on you. What will you do? Testify, he said simply. Against Westlake, against my former colleagues. It won't make me popular in corporate circles. Rachel understood the magnitude of his sacrifice. You could lose your license. Some things matter more, he replied, kissing her once more before they stepped into separate worlds again. Verdict. The courtroom buzzed with tension as Julian Pierce took the witness stand. News of his dismissal from Blackwell and Hayes had spread through legal circles overnight, along with rumors of federal investigations into Westlake Chemical. Mr. Pierce, Rachel began, maintaining professional distance despite their intimacy hours earlier. Please explain to the court why Westlake Chemical concealed evidence of contamination. Objection. Westlake's new counsel shouted. Calls for speculation. Your Honor, Rachel countered, Mr. Pierce was directly involved in the company's legal strategy and has first-hand knowledge of these decisions. Judge Woodson considered briefly. Overruled. The witness may answer. Julian faced the jury squarely. Westlake executives knew about containment failures since 2019. They systematically falsified water quality reports while developing internal contingency plans for potential litigation. The company established a fund of $60 million, not for cleanup, but to fight any lawsuits that might arise when the contamination eventually came to light. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Rachel continued methodically, guiding Julian through his testimony as he detailed years of corporate malfeasance. With each answer, he dismantled the defense he had once been paid to construct. "And why are you testifying today?" Rachel asked, finally. Julian's gaze swept across the courtroom, past his former colleagues' contemptuous stares to the families from Mercer Springs. "Because some things are worth more than career advancement. Because those affected deserve the truth." His eyes found Rachel's. "And because sometimes we need to be reminded of why we became lawyers in the first place." The jury deliberated for just 4 hours before returning with a verdict. Westlake Chemical was liable for $350 million in damages, plus punitive awards that pushed the total to $500 million. Judge Woodson ordered immediate remediation of the contaminated areas and established a medical monitoring program for all Mercer Springs residents. As the courtroom emptied, Rachel found herself surrounded by tearful clients expressing gratitude. Through the crowd, she spotted Julian standing alone near the exit, watching her with quiet pride. Later that evening, they sat on Rachel's balcony overlooking the city lights, sharing a bottle of wine. "The State Bar Association called," Julian said, swirling the burgundy liquid in his glass. "Ethics investigation pending." Rachel squeezed his hand. "We'll fight it. You exposed criminal activity. That should count for something." "Maybe." He smiled ruefully. "Either way, I'm considering a career change. To what? Environmental law, perhaps. I've recently been inspired by this brilliant attorney who reminded me why laws exist in the first place." Julian's eyes held hers. "Think you might know someone who'd take on a controversial partner?" Rachel laughed. "The Environmental Justice Project has a strict policy against hiring corporate sellouts." "Former corporate sellouts," he corrected, pulling her onto his lap. "Currently reformed and seeking redemption." 3 months later, Julian received a conditional censure rather than disbarment, thanks in part to testimony from Judge Woodson about the public interest served by his actions. The Environmental Justice Project, bolstered by publicity from the Westlake case, opened a new office with Rachel as directing attorney. On their first official day as colleagues, Rachel found a small potted tree on her desk with a note, "For new beginnings and deeper roots. Some things are worth nurturing, even when they start on opposite sides." That evening, as Julian traced lazy patterns on Rachel's bare shoulder in the dimness of her bedroom, she marveled at how completely their lives had transformed. From adversaries to allies to lovers, their path had been unconventional but somehow inevitable. "Any regrets?" she murmured against his chest. Julian's arms tightened around her. "Only that I spent so long on the wrong side of the courtroom. But then again," he added, kissing her softly, "if I hadn't been your opponent, we might never have met." Rachel smiled, thinking of the dozens of cases waiting on their new shared desk, other communities needing advocates, other wrongs needing righting. The work ahead would be challenging, but they would face it together, their legal minds complementing each other in ways neither had imagined possible when they'd first stood on opposite sides of that courtroom. "To justice," she whispered. "And to love," Julian added, completing a verdict they had written together.